Do. Am I live? And 10. That should be 12, I think. And this should be your. Yep. Hello coders, welcome to another How to Code Well live stream. This is the 12th live stream, I believe, in this project. What we're doing is we're creating a invoicing application in PHP. However, we're doing this without any kind of framework and any kind of library, apart from obviously libraries that help test the application. This is going to be used for FreeCodeCamp. This will be used as a teaching application that I will be teaching object-oriented programming. So this is just the build process of this application. This is just me thinking about how I'm going to build it and building it. Once I have come up with the actual application, I can then use that as testing material. So just bear with me a minute. I just want to get all of the ducks in a row before we start. So let me just update that. All good. Okay, so where we left off last week, we had this root match method here, which matched the root, and I was able to print out the matches that match the root. I will recap in just a second. And there's two things I want to achieve today. The first is I want to get the matches to actually go back into the controller, because these are the parameters in the URL. Second one, I want to drink my cup of tea without it going cold. So that's the second one. Okay, so we also had an issue last week where I couldn't get the error report. The error pages working, the error document in the vhost. I didn't get an opportunity to look at this over the weekend, so it's still broken. So that acceptance test is still failing. However, I've just ran the 39 unit tests, and they are still passing, which is all good. So let's just do a quick recap before we get in, just so I can refresh my mind. So we have a routing array here full of these roots, and what we're trying to do today is we're matching the group, the regex group here, and what we're going to do is we're passing this into a mechanism that then matches the pattern of the URI, the requested URI, to this pattern block here, and then we can pull out the controller, and then we can pull out the controller's action, which will be used as the method that we call. So in this case, we've got invoice and then 0 to 9, and that should go to the invoice class and in the controller, and it should call the index method. So I'll just show you there. So that we should go to invoice, which is here, and then we should call the index. Now, I did pass in the request object itself. This is something that we built I think it was last week. If I close that down, I can just show you quickly. So we've got the HTTP and helper, that's in the SRC. We go into root, we have the, we have all of the roots. So we have the router that takes all of the roots. So that generates a root object for each one of those that I've just shown you in that array. And then we have a request. I haven't committed these yet, I do apologize. And that will hold the parameters of the request, as well as, if I scroll up here, the actual path and the method. So we also need to check that the method is also allowed, and if the method isn't allowed, then we run a 405. Now, before I get started, I just want to make a point. I mentioned last week that I wanted to filter the input. I wanted to sanitize and clean the user input. And I was thinking about this over the weekend, and I don't think this is a good idea at this point. And the reason why is to do with responsibilities. I don't think that filtering the values that are supplied is the responsibility of the router. I think that is the responsibility of a form handler, right? Because there's a couple of reasons. One is that there's multiple responsibilities going on here. The router, in my opinion, should only deal with the routing. Okay, it's not dealing with any sanitization of user input. Also, in order to sanitize and clean and filter input, one must know the context in which that input is used in. So, for example, I could use filter var, or I could use filter input, and I could be filtering those based upon a known set of rules. So whether or not it's a Boolean, whether or not it's an integer, whether or not it's a string or an email, and so forth. I don't know at this point what these are. If I just demonstrate, if I go to the public, and then no, it's not. Sorry, it's in here in the routing. So we're saying here that this needs to be 0 to 9, but we don't know whether or not 0 is a Boolean being false, 1 is true, or whether it's all the way up to 9. There's no knowledge of what that value actually represents. In this case, it's going to be the ID of the invoice, sure, but it could be anything, right? It could be any kind of number. And that would have that context of what that number would have a series of rules that we need to validate against. This is another reason why at some point I want to take the validation out of the HTTP, because it is in its own right its own component, and it's not just in HTTP. So anyway, let's just write some code, because that's going off on a bit of a tangent, I guess. What I'm trying to say is I'm not going to worry too much about validating user input at this point. If anybody wants to query that, has a question about that, disagrees with this, then let me know. Put your thoughts down in the comments, and we'll have that debate. But for now, I'm just going to keep it as is. So we're going to take a look now at the where are we? We've got the roots. Well, I suppose what I should do is let's just take it from the start. So when we go to public and we go to the index, what we're doing here is we're booting the kernel, passing in the array of roots that we've supplied from the bootstrap. The bootstrap is in app config. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's in the bootstrap. Should be in the config, sure, but it's not. It's actually in the kernel path, which is in src helper kernel bootstrap. So I want to remove this at some point. So we've set up the validators, we've set up the routing, we've created a routing factory, and we've passed in the roots. We've made the root data, which we've got from the routing.php, and we're making the roots based on the root factory. The root factory then, after that happens, then validates the roots and so forth. Excellent. That will throw an exception if any of these roots are invalid, and that's fine. One could argue that this mechanism should actually be done in the make roots routine, and I guess that is the case. Perhaps we'll refactor it at some point. So anyway, on line 22 here, what we're doing is we're returning those roots. So we now have an array of root objects, which are represented by this here. So we have the pattern, we've got the controller, action, methods, and so forth. Fine. Methods being the post get HTTP method. So that goes off to as an array, and then what we do is we pass that in on the boot of the kernel. So this is a public static method. So we boot that in, and then we pass in the request URI, which is the string that is being sent by the user via the HTTP request. And what we were trying to do is we're trying to compare that with the request method, so we are passing that in, to those roots. And I've called this locator, and we're doing a locate. Now really, this should actually be a match, to be honest, thinking about it, because what we're trying to do is we're matching the pattern of the request URI to this. Okay, then after this we do some throwing of exceptions if the root cannot be located or cannot be matched. We pass in the route that was found, and then we do controller name, get the controller, and then we instantiate that controller, and then we run the action, and we pass in the request. Okay, so the request gets passed in at this point. And the request, we do a new instance of request, and we create the request URI and the request method, like so. Okay, so there's a lot going on here a little bit, so let's just bring all these out a little. Okay, so we instantiate the request at this point, we instantiate the locator, we instantiate the controller. Yeah, we pass in the request at the time that we're passing in the locator. So we can manipulate the request from within the locator if we want to. So if I open that up in this constructor, so that we are now in the locator, we are passing in the request, and we've got the array of roots. And what we're doing is we're setting the roots. What does that do? Okay, so that just sets the roots, fine. Not sure why we're setting the roots and then doing roots. That's a bit odd. Why did I do that? That doesn't make any sense to me. This set roots. Not sure I need to do that because set roots does that itself. Okay, perhaps what I need to do then is remove this. So we got set roots, create pattern, root match, locate. Yeah, I'm going to remove set roots. I don't understand why that's there. That also needs to be removed. Okay, before I start, because I've moved some things around, let me just run this and see. Yep, those will pass. So they were never tested in the first place. Tut, tut, tut. Okay, so we do the constructor, then what happens after that? So I'm just, because I've had a weekend, I'm just trying to refresh my memory. Oh yeah, we then run locate based on that. So we can run this. So found root we're setting as null, and then we have a query string, which is the get path. Okay, that makes sense. Then we're looping over each of the roots, and then we're saying as root, found root is equal to the root match. So that will return the found root object based on the query string. Okay, and then if found, we then have the instance of the root. We break out of that for each loop because we're in the loop here, and then we return found root. Okay, that kind of makes a bit of sense. So root match, let's go over and have a look at, well, if PHP Storm would let me, and it's not. So root match is this thing here. So we are running a preg match based on the creation of the pattern. Root to check is that. Let's have a look. That's a static method. What am I doing here? Oh yeah, I'm just pulling out the pattern, and I'm putting in some delimiters, and I've got the caret, and I've got the end $sign here. So start and end of that pattern. So that creates the pattern. Okay, that makes sense. And then we have the query string, which we've passed in. That's the thing that we wish to match. That's the second parameter here. And then we have this matches. Matches is going to be an array excuse me, of the matched parameters within those groups. Let me just grab a cup of tea. I see. Now what we need to do is we need to return those matches as well as the found root. Well, do we need to do that or not? Let me have a think. We're returning the root of the root to check, but in the locate method we know what the found root is, because if that was to return, say, an array or true or whatever, because we're in a for each loop, we know the root that we're in. So we know that that is the case. So perhaps what I need to do is I need to return matches rather than return the actual root. So check would be, let me just double check this. Check would be a return of an init of false, and returns 1 if the pattern is matches, 0 if not, or false, or if an error is recurred. Okay, so that's fine. Oh no, sorry, I've clicked on the wrong thing. Let's go back to root matches. Where are we? Okay, so what I could do is just return matches, because I guess that would be an empty array if that is the case. So let's do check is equal to there, and then we can do, so we're not actually going to return that, we're going to return matches. And we can return matches if, so we can use this in a ternary operator. So we can do check, and then what we do is we return matches or we return false. So this is going to be, or null. Let's just return null. That's probably better, isn't it? Because then what we can do is we can do it returns null or it returns an array. So null or, whoops, array. Like so. Okay. Now I can't remember what the offsets and the flags were for preg match. So what I would like to do is I just want to run some tests, just some visual aids. So I'm going to do print r. I'm going to do a pre. Usually, and I keep saying this, I would do this in a debugger, but I don't have one set up on this machine. Well, I'm running off of a container, so I don't have xdebug installed. Print r and then check, and then we'll kill out this. And it's not check, sorry, it's matches. That's what I need. Okay. So if I go to, sorry, if I click this button here, we can see the browser. So that's gone to slash blah, blah, blah. If I take this to something completely wrong, then we have an empty array. Okay, so that's not false. That's an empty array. Then if we did something like invoice and then 1, 2, 3, if I can spell invoicing, we also have an empty array. That's a bit peculiar, isn't it? Let's go back to the code. QueryString. Let's go just double check that I've got that in the routing. Yep, that is in the routing, but it wasn't matched. Okay. I'm not very good with regex. Where is the locator gone? There we go. Okay, so we're creating the pattern, we're checking the root to match, and then we have matches, and we are just printing out matches here. Let's just do a var dump. Whoops. Of check. So check is returning an init of 0 of invoice, and then 1, 2, 3 is an invoice, is an init of that, and / is not that. That's not what I wanted. Okay, so let's go back to the coder. Okay, let me just take a look at the kernel here. So we are passing in the roots at this point. It's because it's a Monday morning, isn't it? Because it's a Monday morning. I'm starting to think I need to put in on Xdebug and do it through debugging, because this is baffling. Because I'm sure that this was working last week. Let me just do a Control Z a minute, bring it back to what it was. Come on. That is very peculiar. One 192.168. How annoying is this? So not even that is working. I did remove the set roots, but I don't understand. I mean, that didn't look like it was going to do anything. We are setting the array of roots like this. That's fine. It's almost like, okay, let me just do a quick come out of this. Return found root, because that's what it was returning, and then let me just run that again in the browser quickly. How bizarre. This is working. Home invoices, home invoices. And even invoice 123 is, unless invoice 123 is being seen as the how frustrating. Let me have a look at the code and see. I need a debugger. That's what I need. I need to get this debugger working, because I think I'm seeing some false positives here. The tests, I could use them to try this out, I guess. Let me, although I think I've got some failing tests, so that's not going to help too much. Found root is root to check, then we return that, fine. We have all of this, good. I still need to get those matches somehow back, but those matches don't appear to be what I need. So that is the frustrating thing here. So what I've done is I've essentially tried to do what I did last week. I did print R matches. I want to somehow return matches, but it's refusing in that ternary operator I had. Okay, let me see what comes back if I just do blah blah blah, completely screw it up. It's blank page. Okay, so that's cool, because we don't have anything to match to, so that would kind of make logical sense. because this check doesn't work. I mean, what I could do, I guess, and this is really dirty, don't do this. Do not do this. And I'm going to reiterate that this is not production ready and will never be production ready. But at this point, we're just going to return matches. And we're going to return null at this point. So this is an array. And this is null. Or an array. Array. There we go. Right. Root match. Where's that being called from? Here. So these should be matches. And then we have this. And then essentially what I would like to do is I would like to do this. Request set parameters matches. That's what I want to do. That's where I want to get to, because at that point I've then set it to that request, which means that I can then pass this to the controller and everything is good. But it's not playing ball. Let me. Okay, so that really then therefore needs to go into here. This is matches, if this should be empty. I should really be testing this. I'm just bashing the keyboard now. If this is not empty, matches, then what we do is we set that. Now I do know that the first parameter is itself the thingy, but it is itself the query string, but I got a feeling there is a way I can manipulate that. So I will do that in just a second. But let me just make sure from this point of view that we are actually returning what we are saying we're returning and not something silly. Print R. Oh, I wish I had my debugger. This make it so much easier. I could just step through it all and go, yes, at this point we have this, instead of writing var dump and die and all of this stuff. It also means that I wouldn't have to be jumping between the browser. Yeah, that's fine. What we could do, I guess, just to hack it around, is remove that that. So remove every unset 0, and we would do that from the match perspective. I think we could do that. Let's try that. Let's run this. Let's go back to the Cody code. Go back to the Cody code, and then at this point here, we want to do an unset of matches at this point, but we can only do this if matches is set. This is looking terrible code now. This is looking awful. This is disgusting code. Ugh, should be ashamed of myself. If is set, and I haven't tested this. Ooh. If is set matches, unset matches 0, 1. In fact, that's stupid. We should only do that within here. And now we have nested stuff, which is not nice. I'll have a check and see whether or not we can unset it even if we don't have it. I'm not sure if that allows for that. Destroys a specified variable. The behavior of unset inside of a function can vary depending on what type of variable you are attempting to destroy. Okay. I think I might have to play around with that. Ah, this is horrible stuff. Okay, let me see if I can refactor that in a minute. So at this point here, we're then setting the parameters. And if I go back to the browser and then refresh this page, I'm hoping, yeah, that is the parameter. The first parameter is that. Really what I need to do is re-index those arrays as well. And I could also use this as associative array, because I know that this is going to be the ID, so I could actually map that to that. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We've just written some horrible, hideous code that needs to be put in the bin. Look at this. This is nuts. I mean, what an... Ugh. If check. So that will return false or 0 and 1. Then what we do is we check that we have the matches. Why don't we just check that we have the matches? Wouldn't that be beneficial? Why are we doing the check? Let me have a look at the documentation for preg match. Matches is null. To begin with, preg match pattern, blah, 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 while this example, God, there's lots of docs for this. String matches is optional. If matches is provided, then it is filled with the results of the search. Matches 0 will contain the text that was matched in the full pattern. Yes, we know that. Matches 1 will have the text that matched the first captured parentheses pattern, subpattern, and so on. That is what we need. So therefore, we don't need to worry about what is returned with preg, because we'll either have matches or we won't. That'll either be empty or it won't be. So therefore, we don't need to worry about the check. We just need to worry about the matches. So what we can do is we can do if false 1 2 3 1 2 3. So if it isn't empty, which is the matches, then what we can do is we can just return matches, right? But we want to return matches but remove the that one here. Let me just have a look at preg and see if there's any flags that we can supply, because I think there is. So we want to get rid of, so we've got flags 0 and offset 0. We want to somehow get rid of the first the first thing. We don't really care about that. So that's offset. This is flags. Flags can be used in the following way. There's only one way. preg offset capture. If this flag is passed, for every occurring match, the appendant string offset will also be returned. Note that this changes the value of matches into an array where every element is an array consisting of the match string at offset 0 and its string offset into sub... No, we don't need to worry about that, I don't think. Normally, the search starts from the beginning of the subject string. The optional parameter offset can be used to specify the alternative place from which to start in the string in bytes. No, we don't need to worry about that either. Using offset is not equivalent to passing substr, blah, blah, blah. No, don't need to worry about that. So no, it would appear that I need to manually remove that, which is fine. Let's go back to the locator. Okay, so we don't need to check whether it is set, because it is set. It will always be set, because it will be set if that has been matched. So there we go. So if it isn't empty, and I could just do a exclamation mark, but I like to read whether it's true or false. So if it isn't empty, then we remove the first thing and then we return the matches. So we don't need to worry about that. And then we return null. So I'm starting to flatten this out a little bit, which is nice. Should we be returning null or returning void? No, I guess we should be returning null. Now, Now for URLs that don't have a pattern to match, so if it's just like /, that would just return an empty string, I guess. So an empty array, which I think is okay at this stage. So then we have root matches, set parameters based on there. Wonderful. Let me hit save. Let's now go to the kernel. Kernel, slurp of my tea. It's good. We've got a bit of time to play with. That's fine. Locator is new locator. That's the locator. It's really a matcher, really, isn't it? It's sort of a root matcher. I don't like the word of that, to be honest. And then controller, then we pass in the request. We passed in the request at this point, and at this point we've manipulated the request by adding in the parameters. Is that a code smell? Is that an anti-pattern? I think I'm going to have to think about that offline. It's not really closed and open in that case. But anyway, let's continue down this journey. So we're returning the request, passing that into the action. At this case, it's going to be locator, nope, controller type invoice, and this is the route that we've landed in. So what I'm going to do, just for removing confusion, because what we've got is we have 3 invoice routes here, and we've only got 1 action, which is stupid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this as list. I'm going to have that as the index, or yeah, and then no, sorry, yeah, that's what I'm going to have, and then this is edit. Yeah, so that's the index of single one. That is going to be a list of invoices, and that is going to be the editing of an invoice. And let's just remove that because that doesn't make any sense. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to where am I going to go? Into here. We need to have all of those methods defined. So we have public index, public edit, and we're going to have public list, like so. You be careful with calling it list. That's quite dangerous. There is a list function already. I think what I might do therefore is just not bother with the list for now. What I would like to do is have this as like some sort of prefix, so action, suffix like edit action. But just because of that keyword conflict, I'm going to remove list and then deal with that soon. So let's go to the routing here. Let's just remove the list. Well, I guess I could just call this dashboard, right? Just to cover that base. It's always dangerous when you're using dynamic method names. 1, because they could be overwritten, and 2, because you could be venturing into already defined keyword names. So okay, so we're going to be running the index. That's where we're hoping to go, and I'm going to do views, and I'm just going to put that as a directory. So views invoice. This is going to be index. This is going to therefore be index. This is therefore going to be edit. This is therefore going to be dashboard. There's the B. There we go. if I can spell. And then let's bring this all back. We need to fix the views, so let's go to public views. So let's grab a new directory, call this invoice. And in that invoice, there is the invoice itself. Well, let's rename that to be index. Let's have another one. Let's just duplicate that. Call that edit. Let's have another one and call that dashboard. Technically, the index is the dashboard if you think about like the entry points. But for this, I'm just going to leave it like so. Okay. Okay, I've written a load of code, no tests, and I'm not sure if this is going to work. So, you know, here's hoping. Happy Monday. And what we would like to do is we would like to just print out the request at this point. So first of all, I'm just going to do a var dump. Well, var dump at this point. And I'm just going to do request get parameters and see if that has actually printed out those parameters at this point. Die. Nope, it has not done anything. This is because I've done too much code without any testing. This is what happens when you do coding with no testing. Invoice, dashboard, invoice. Have I changed these? That's index, that's edit. And then that's just / going to the index page. Let's go to dashboard, index. Nope. Template. Nope. Invoice. There we go. Have a look. Why is that failing? Ugh. Routing 404, don't need that. Helper kernel. Have I killed any of the unit tests? Yes, I have. Okay, this will give me an idea of what's going on. Failed asserting that null is an instance of root. Yeah. Ah, of course. Yes, of course. So when we go back to the locator here, because I've changed the... yes, of course. See, test your work, Pete. Test your work. So locate here is returning a null. I haven't actually returned the actual thing. So what we need to do, let's just grab that and go back into the here. We need to do root. Found root is equal to root. There we go. Run that. Yeah, passed. Because what I wasn't doing is I wasn't actually returning that. Yeah, PHP Stan would have picked that up because it would be returning null instead of although that is null and maybe it wouldn't. Okay, whatever. So if false, I need a debugger. I need a debugger. La 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 la. So this is throwing an exception 404 if we can't get the root. Let's just tail the logs. Oh, great. There we go. So we have a 404 that we're throwing on // which is not good. I've just broken everything, haven't I? It's just, this is where I'm at. For some reason, this is just blowing up. Locate, which means that this hasn't been matched. I've shot myself in the foot, haven't I? I've shot myself in the foot because root match is going to unset that, which means that that will be empty if we're on / and we don't have a pattern to match. Oh dear. Yeah. What a moron. So that now, I'm going around in circles. I'm going around in circles. So the problem was that the matches returns the matches based on the group, right? Based on the regular expression group. So if I go back to the routing up here, this is the group that I was checking for, right? However, and so that would be the returned match. However, if I'm just checking for // there isn't a group to match, so matches wouldn't have that as the second key in the array. But what I was doing foolishly in the root match method here was I was trying to be clever, and I was trying to remove the first matches, right? The first matches is always going to be the string, the string that was the pattern that was used, or the subject that was being matched. And I removed that, and because I removed that, well, there wasn't anything else. And then I had a check down here in the locate thing, which then checked whether or not that would be empty. And if it was being empty, then it would class the whole root as invalid and therefore return null. And then that meant the home page didn't work. So what I need to do at some point is I need to fix that. So parameters does remove. So I guess I need to do an unset of matches 0 at this point. Ah, dear. Let me just make sure that those unit tests are running. Yes, they are. Okay, good. And the home page still works. The invoicing page doesn't work because I've gone and messed about with the template paths because I like to tinker with things. So this now is not correct. None of these are correct. One could argue that this template path needs to be a defined config. So this is the invoice dashboard, and I guess I should also have all of this in as acceptance tests dashboard. This is the invoice edit page, and this is the invoice page. This is the invoice page. Although that's not working either. So let me think. We are in the invoice. We need to go into templates and we need to load up the base.php file. Of course, if I was using Twig, this would be so much easier. But we're not. So anyway, we need to come out of the current directory, which is invoice, and we need to go into templates and then base.php. That has not that isn't working. What I'm going to do is go into config. We have set the kernel path, we've set the public path, and we've set the base path. The public path is what I'm using, but I could, if I wanted to, have template path, and this is so base and then src helper kernel, but actually what we need is the public path, and then we need to go into templates. So, well, it's views, public, views, and then templates. Oh, I know why this isn't working, because I've put that outside of templates. That's really silly of me, isn't it? Okay, well, yeah. One could argue that this is a view and then that is a template. But, okay. Anyway, so template path is public path. Then that goes to views, and then that is templates, like that. And then in the invoice, in dashboard, we do, include once, template path. Oh, come on, PHP Storm. Let me deal with that, please. Stop. No. You're too clever for your own good. Okay, so let's go back to the browser. We can see that this is now the invoice dashboard. Woo! So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hard code in the dashboard. I'm just going to hard code something. I know what I'm talking about. Let's close that and then go into a UL li, and then let's just do invoice 123 ahref, and that would be back invoice in voice 123 There we go. Now I know that this is terrible, and I should be sort of like really being a little bit more clever with these templates and stuff, but and it's not really strict HTML because the base path is but we'll get to all of this in you know, once the routing is set up. So let's hit save, and then I'm going to just go back to the browser, and we can see that we have, this is the invoice dashboard, and we have invoice 123. So if we go home and then invoices, so this is slowly working. And then if we go to invoice, then we have the invoice page. And what I would like on the invoice page, which is in index here, this is the invoice page for invoice, and I would like to have the ID that we've given. But we're quite a way off of this. Let me just drink my tea. Because what I need to do is pass that through. So let's go back to the invoice. And then let's just do a var dump of request. Let's see if we have actually set those. So get parameters die. Oops, sorry, I should be showing you what I'm doing. Here we go. So var dump request get parameters die within the index action of invoice. There we go. Awesome. So we have the parameters. That's really, really cool. I like that because we're on that invoice 123 page and we have that coming through. Now, I could do a couple of things here. I could either go down the route of saying, well, we need to have an associative array. So that needs to, instead of be just number 1, which doesn't make any sense because it actually should be 0, but because I've unset the array, we haven't reordered the keys, reindexed the keys. Or I could have you know, like an associative array. So that represents ID. Because what I would like is, if I go back to the code, I would like to then say, instead of that, I could do get parameter passing in the key of ID. So then that would be the ID. And then eventually I would like to do something like this, which is a bit, you know, far reaching at the moment. But eventually I would like to do parameters ID is equal to that. And then somehow in the view we will get the parameters and then push them through. I haven't worked that bit out yet, but that's essentially what I would like to achieve. So okay, let's work backwards from that then. The first thing we need to do, we can leave that in at the moment because that's not actually being used. What the first thing I need to do is I need to set the associative arrays of the parameters. So we can do, I guess we would need to do this from the routing itself. So we have this pattern here. And we could do this by either having an ID, the word ID up in here, and then have an action for every thing, like a pattern. Or what we could do is we could have parameters, params, as an array where the first one is the ID. And we could map that to this. A tidier way, of course, is to do this, which I think is the way it's done in Laravel and Symfony. Well, sort of. And then in that locator class, we then check for the ID. Well, we check for anything in these curly braces here, and then we get the parameter. We match that to this, and then we get that, and then we put this in the locator, which means that we can have multiple parameters that we can define. That is tidier in my opinion. That is way tidier in my opinion. I'm just a bit concerned because that's an awful lot of work. Because I'm going to have to somehow find that, remove that, inject this to where this is within that string, and then on the matches I can then return the matches based off of it. I can build the matches from here. All right, let's see, what do I need to do? The first thing in kernel, in the locate method here, we have already got a static method that creates the pattern. So we could do at this point, we get the pattern. That's going to be the raw pattern, and in that pattern we'll have the ID malarkey. So we would check for that. So it would be another regular expression to check for these things. So it starts with, well, it would be this, wouldn't it? I'm just going to hammer some code out. So it would be something like preg match, where the subject is the actual pattern, like that, with obviously the delimiters. So that would be something like hash, oops, that's not hash, hash dot, this is total blue sky thinking here, hash, then get pattern. Is that right? Let me just double check. Preg is the pattern, no, too tiny, and the subject. So actually that's the subject, not the pattern. Sorry, I'm going backwards, aren't I? So this would actually therefore, this wouldn't be the pattern would therefore be the subject. This is getting complicated. Root match, create pattern. So this would be that, and it would be greedy. So anything within there. It's probably a better way of doing this. And then we would pass in the pattern to match. And then we would get some matches. Crikey. Something like that. Oh yeah, obviously we would need to have the that and this, I believe. Maybe. No. Oh dear. No, that's not right, is it? That's not. Gosh, regex is one of my downsides. Regex is really, really painful. It boils my brain, especially at this time of the morning. Preg match, and then that's the pattern. We want to look for this within the subject. So that's the pattern, that's the subject. And then we get the matches. Wow. Well, I've drank my tea. That was the second thing I wanted to accomplish today. Or this morning on this stream. So at least that's done. Okay, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this offline. I'm going to put another to-do in here. I need to think about this, because this isn't. I might be able to do something crazy with like strlens and straposes and all this stuff. The fear I have is that we're doing a regular expression in a regular expression, and thinking about that out loud doesn't make any sense. Because, you know, why go to all that effort to do that? For every route, regardless of whether it's matched, I would have to do this. And if I think about this logically, and thoroughly and methodically, what I am trying to achieve here is, on routing, I want to replace this, which is that. So I want to replace this with that. That's what I want to achieve. Now, there are other ways of doing this other than regex. We have this string. We can split the string out by that. So we could use some sort of, I think we could probably get around this using some string manipulation. If this was in Python, it would be a bit easier because Python has a lot of inbuilt stuff that we can play around with this stuff. This shouldn't be a regex problem. This is just replacing a string with a string. That is essentially what it's doing. This is not a regex issue. We are literally saying, right, for every parameter in here, we want to pull that out and bung it in here. That's all we want to do. There's no regular expression required. So that is not what I'm doing in the locate method. That is not what I'm trying to do here. In create pattern, this is not the thing to do. Certainly not. This is too much work, too overhead. But what I do need to do is I need to replace with param expression. Pattern. That's what I need to do. So I need to somehow go through each of the patterns, or I need to get the pattern and I need to replace each one of those things. That is what we're going to be doing in the next stream, which probably will be Wednesday, because tomorrow I need to shoot off early to commute to get to a client. But I will be thinking about this. I might attack this a little bit later on, probably this evening, trying to find other ways to do this. I appreciate completely that there has been 0 unit tests today, and there has been a lot of code change, and that is not how you do good programming. So I appreciate that. I completely appreciate that. There's been no testing today. However, if I ran this, they all pass. So that means that the code that I've written doesn't have any unit tests to back it up, which is shameful, absolutely shameful. And we will be trying to sort that out and get better with that as the stream goes on. But anyway, thank you all for watching. Happy coding. I do need to dive off because I do need to get my head buried into some JavaScript and some Ajax and some potential Python. Not Python, sorry, PHP. Too many languages. API stuff for some other work. But yeah, I don't know. I would prefer if I had tested some of this today. But I guess this is just demonstrating my thought process. I'm just hammering out code on the page. We've got this route match working. We do have pages that are running, which I'm fairly happy with. But for now, though, this is kind of slowly getting there. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys and girls. Happy coding, everyone. I'll see you again soon, all right? Cheers. Wednesday, 7:30. Yeah, British summertime. Bye.